Hi there. After his previous encyclopedic work on the Merseybeat scene, beat waves cross the Mersey, Manfred Kuhlman uh, continued to visit Liverpool and amassed a great quantity of research by talking to guys who were in the groups, who were in management, and so on, getting photographs, some of them professionally taken, some amateur taken during gigs and so on, posters, flyers, the business cards of groups, etc. And what he's done is publish this book, which is the second volume. Some Other Guys follows on from Beat Waves Across the Mersey, and it's got another 66 groups covered in detail, and then another 105 lineups where it just talks about the name of the group and who was in it. But the main 66 is very detailed. If they made any records, where they used to play, changes of personnel, and so on. There's also quite a bit of information about the venues, uh, the hundreds of venues that were in Merseyside area, and the events that went on, the beat cruises on the Royal Iris and so on, the big Operation Big Beat over the water in New Brighton, and so on. So it's a fantastic book, and together the two volumes really are such an in-depth look at the scene, and groups are covered from the famous like the Hideaways to the obscure like Og and the Flintstones. The format of the book is you get these pages which shows some photos, some posters, and so on. And as you can see, there's an advert here. This advert for the Cavern, and it's the Rattles, which was a German group from Hamburg, and this was 12th of December 1963. Now, we had seen the Rattles in Hamburg at the Star Club in the November, and Bob Wooler booked them for the Cavern and flew them over, and they did a series of appearances at the Cavern, and it went down really well. They modelled themselves on the Merseybeat groups. They sang the same sort of records. They copied the words, sometimes by listening to the records and sometimes by asking some of the Liverpool bands what the lyrics were. And the whole thing was made even more engaging with their accents. And they were very, very good. And they continued in the business for quite a long time. So that's really the kind of layout of the book. Lots and lots of information about the venues. This one's the Iron Door, which was the rival to the Cavern, really. A venue that wasn't particularly well known. This one, the Shaking Around Club, and it's notable because it's a place that we played when I was in a band. It's one of the few places we played. It's right in the city centre in Slater Street, tiny little place, and we played there one weekend. And I was amazed to find the poster for the club in this book. So his research was spot on, really, really rigorous research. Uh, another interesting thing, since there was something like 750 groups on the scene at that time, and they were mainly guitar groups, so each of those would have three guitars. You didn't really see that many people with guitars in the city centre, which you do now. And you also never saw anybody busking. So you would imagine with all these bands who many of them are only working intermittently, that they might have augmented their income by going on a street corner in the city centre and blasting out a few numbers. Didn't happen. I think basically they weren't allowed to. The police were pretty strict back then. Now you can't walk 10 paces through the city centre without some high pitched wailing about unfaithful boyfriends, and the girl singers are just as bad. There are some decent musicians playing. I must admit, as you pass, you can hear some people are really proficient. But the whole thing kind of melts into one sound as you walk the length of the city centre. And I just find it interesting that back then, when there was so many bands, you didn't have that. And now, where people can perform online, uh, you get them working in the streets. It's just something I find a little bit different. One of the other things that's in here, and I don't think I've earmarked it, was an advert for bands. Oh, here it is. Yeah, to all beat groups. What it was an appeal for any band members to assemble outside St George's Hall on the plateau for a mass photograph, and it was done by Stern, the German magazine. And if I remember rightly, it was Astrid was the photographer, and it was a massive photograph. Loads turned up, um, and I'll put the picture here. Uh, and interestingly enough, a similar thing happened spontaneously when John Lennon was murdered in 1980. Uh, Bands just got together at St George's Plateau, and that really resurrected the interest in the Beatles in the city, because up till then uh, it had gone fallow. The cavern had been turned into a car park, and there was really nothing marking uh, the connection with the Beatles. Our city council was not only derelict in that regard, they're actually vandals, actively seeking to suppress memories of the Beatles. After the death of John Lennon, there was a resurrection to the point now where Matthew Street is just full of venues. You've got the reopened cavern, and every year we have what we still call Beatles Week, although the council refused to call it that. And our connection with the Beatles, Liverpool and the Beatles, has been resurrected. And the book really shows you why. It shows you it was such a vibrant scene, um, and the fact that the Beatles emerged from it, became such world dominating stars and still are, really makes this kind of book um, even more valuable, because you see the background, the history, and why the Beatles were able to develop into the world force that they were. So anyone interested in that scene, Manfred's two books are invaluable. And for me, it's been a fantastic trip down memory lane, and it preserves the memory of those times really, really well.